Imagine you and your friends, Patrick, John, Bill, and Tom, are trying to decide what to eat. You can get a hot dog, pizza, or a taco. So you vote. And there's a clear winner, the hot dog. Seems fair, right? But what if I told you the outcome depends entirely on how you vote? And worse, what if the winner isn't actually what the group prefers? Now, hearing that the hot dog might not be the right choice, even though the majority of people voted for it, might seem illogical at first. The best way to break this down is by teaching some mathematical terms. One of the cornerstones of mathematical logic are called sentence symbols. They are basically variables that hold a specific value. In this instance, A could be, I have a hot dog. This could be true or false. Let's say in this specific instance, I do have a hot dog right here. So we can connect two different sentence symbols, I have a hot dog, to B, I will eat a hot dog, through an implication. This means A implies B. If I have a hot dog, then I will eat a hot dog. And for instance, if A is true, I have a hot dog, it's right here, then that implies that B must also be true. I will eat a hot dog. If A is true and I have a hot dog, and we state that it implies B, but I don't eat the hot dog, then we derive a contradiction, because this implication states that if A is true, then B must be true. All other combinations of implications are true and valid. If A is false, the implication always holds. And we can use the same exact mathematical model to consider a preference. This means that B is preferred over A. Let's reassign our sentence symbols. A is now a hot dog and B is now pizza. This means that B is preferred over A. This idea of a preference is extremely important and vital when considering social choice theory, and specifically the contradictions that can come from large groups of logical voters making illogical decisions. Another logical mathematical term that can help us break down this even more is the idea of being transitive. If A implies B and B implies C, then the system is transitive and we can derive that A must imply C. And once again, we can correlate the same exact ideology into a preference. If A is preferred over B and B is preferred over C, then obviously A must be preferred over C. And to understand how this paradox happens with our friends who are all logical voters and decide on the hot dog, but at the end of the day, the idea of picking the hot dog does not reflect the ideology of the group as a majority, then we need to look at the voting system a little bit differently, not as a decision, but a logical system. Now imagine this same exact situation with your friends, but except you have 1,000 friends trying to decide what to eat. And imagine this same group of individuals decide that they prefer pizza over a hot dog and a taco over a pizza, but also a hot dog over a taco. All of this is valid logically. So how can this happen? How can we prefer pizza over a hot dog, a taco over pizza, but then a hot dog over both of the things that we already know are preferred over a hot dog? This is known as the Condorcet paradox, discovered in 1785 by Marquis de Condorcet, where a group of logical individuals can make illogical decisions as a group. This paradox is cyclic, which just means that the preference will continue to cycle around back to itself over and over again. The same thing can be considered for implications. Contradictions like these can be defined as paradoxes, and can directly correlate to why you and your friends can accidentally make the worst decision for the group with a majority voter system, and how different voting systems can lead to different results with the same exact individual preference. Because contradicting paradoxes like this don't just exist in equations, they show up in decisions in real life, in voting, in fairness, and in democracy itself. And we can analyze almost all of these instances with a preference implication statement. So instead of asking what is true, we're asking what does the group prefer. These statements are relational, not absolute, which gives opportunity for these paradoxes we are considering. But this raises a deeper question. What does it even mean for one of these statements to be true? How can these statements be true while containing contradictions that can output illogical ranking, while all of the people who voted for this ranking were logical with their respective inputs? Is A over B always true or false? Not exactly. Because in voting, the truth depends on what method you use. For example, let's say we have 100 voters. 40 of these voters prefer A over B and prefer B over C. 35 of these voters prefer B over C and C over A. And the last 25 of these voters prefer C over B and B over A. If we consider this from a majority voting process, clearly A would win because 40 voters picked A as their first and best candidate. So for a majority vote, clearly A wins, right? Now let's consider this from a ranked choice voting system. In this system, you remove the lowest option and redistribute. So C is no longer an option, and we are only considering B and A. Since 25 of the voters preferred B over A, this 25 is now added on to this 35, which equals 60. And by using a ranked choice voting system, B would actually win the pizza. This shows exactly how the truth depends on the method you use for voting. With one method, we had A as our final choice. With the other method, we had B as our final choice, with the same exact logical voters. You change the rules, and you change what is truthful. So in social choice theory, truth isn't something we discover, it's something we construct with how we combine preferences. And even though every individual in this group could be extremely well informed, know exactly what they want, and vote perfectly, the overall group is not rational. And this has extreme implications for life experiences, such as voting for the President of the United States. The voting process in the United States is two major parties, and we decide who we prefer over the other ones. And this is honestly very scary to consider because we decide the president of the entire United States, made up of a population of over 300 million people, and we rank them based on majority and weed out candidates we don't like, which can cause extremely illogical presidential elects. And hearing this may make you think to yourself that this is just some weird edge case, something we could fix with a better voting system. But in 1951, economist Kenneth Arrow proved something shocking to the world. He discovered that there is no perfect voting system. More precisely, no system can convert individual preferences into a group decision while satisfying a few simple fairness rules. The first of these fairness rules are that if everyone prefers A over B, let's say tacos over pizza, then society should too. The second one is that no single person dictates everything. And the third one being that preferences between A and B shouldn't depend on irrelevant opinions. These fairness rules are completely valid, and most people don't even consider these when they're voting, but they are subconsciously. Let's say you're choosing between a hot dog and pizza. With just considering the hot dog and the pizza, let's say the group decides that the pizza wins. And suddenly now, someone introduces a taco. Before, the pizza would win. But now that the taco has been added, the hot dog actually wins. Even though no one changed their opinion about pizza and hot dogs, that outcome changed anyway. This violates fairness. Arrow showed that any voting system must break at least one of these fairness rules. So the problem isn't just that voting can fail sometimes, it's that failure is built into the logic itself. We can compare this to mathematical classic logic since things are supposed to make sense. Earlier, I defined the idea of transitivity as A implies B, then B implies C, then A must imply C. And in most logical systems, this always holds. But in voting systems, in inference rules, even when every individual is perfectly logical, transitivity can still break. And that is just one difference. In classic logic, truth is fixed. A statement is either true or false, independent of how you look at it. But in social choice theory, truth depends on the rules you choose. And while classic logic avoids contradictions, voting systems naturally produce them all of the time, oftentimes going unnoticed by the major population. So, aggregating rational individuals can never guarantee a rational outcome. And at first, this might seem like a strange mathematical problem, but it has real-world consequences. Because voting isn't just about food choices. It's how we make decisions in governments, organizations, and societies. Voting is a system that is forced into all of our lives, and understanding the contradictions and flaws of all voting systems is very important for the major population to understand. And Arrow's theorem tells us something uncomfortable, that no system can perfectly capture what a group wants, while still being completely fair and unbiased. Every system must compromise. Every method has trade-offs. Which means when we vote, we're not just discovering what the people want, we're deciding how to define what the group means. Social choice theory doesn't just study voting. It studies the limits of logic itself when applied to human decisions. And that might just be the strangest part. Not that the voting can fail, but that it was never guaranteed to work in the first place. Because in the end, the paradox isn't in the math. It's in how we try to turn many voices into one. Thank you for watching.